maybe 9% of our energy is actually currently clean. And we've got a phenomenal, we've got to transform a global system, 10x, right? When you started the web, you mentioned that you kind of knew it was going to work when you saw it was growing 10x in a single year, and you did that. Well, tell us more.
So the first web server was an Xbox, a beautiful machine that Steve Jobs had designed when he left for the big time. He was away from Apple, and so it was sitting there, gorgeous thing to program. And it was connected. I watched a film where unusually people were starting to get connected to the internet. So it's 1989, and so I could connect this box to the internet, and I could put a web server on it. And the number of hits on the web server, when you go back and look over the first year, it was exponential. So 10 times as much, many hits on the first web server at the end of the first year as at the beginning. So then when you look at the next year, well, it's exponential again. So next year it's exponential again, but of course it's the same graph, but the axis has changed by a factor of 10. So obviously to understand that, you put it on a log scale. And when you put it on a log scale, it was absolutely straight. 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000. And in fact, there were two lines. The hits per day were slightly less on the weekends than on weeks. So you had Saturday morning television. So that was kind of spooky, because you're thinking, we're locked into an exponential growth, like it's absolutely textbook. And this has happened for 3 years, during which it grew by a factor of 10 every year, so it's grown by a factor of 1,000 in 3 years. And so we need, in fact, if that goes on for another 7 years, we'll have the planet. And there was no evidence that, so after 10 to 11 people, that's actually everybody. And so that, we had to hang on to that. We didn't spend a lot of time looking at those numbers. Most of the time we just spent trying to make sure it didn't break, trying to think what could go wrong, trying to make sure that everybody had realized that it was open, because the Gopher protocol was doing that, actually going faster, and the Gopher protocol was competing with the World Wide Web as a and then at a certain point, the Gopher people in Minnesota said, it might not be royalty free. Down the road, and so people dropped the word Gopher, and they all came to the web, and they said, make sure that, can you assure us it's going to be royalty free? So we made sure royalty free. So lots of things could go wrong. It wasn't obvious that it was going to get to this stage, and still, things can go wrong.
So speaking of things going wrong, first of all, I think this idea that Gopher was actually, for those who don't know Gopher, it was the terrible protocol I mentioned this morning, by coincidence, that put me off in the other days, yeah. But it's interesting, the threat of Gopher no longer being free was enough to kill it, i.e. cost really, really, really matters when we're adopting new technologies. I think the other form of free, though, is the freedom of access.
Freedom, well, we called the internet, we realized it was a permissionless space, right? Where you got an internet cable, came into your cable. I could sit there, write code on my Xbox, which would connect from my computer to any other computer. We had the main name system was running, and so basically all you had to know was the IP address, and you drop the packets in that internet, in that cable, and they would pop out the other end. And the internet wouldn't care what was in those packets. The other computer, when you send a little port number. There was a port number in the packet. One little bit which says what sort of packet stuff this is. So port numbers were sort of small numbers. I invented one. I thought, I need a port number. I didn't call VinSurf and say, hey, can I join the queue to get a port number? I used my 2784 because it was my parents' phone number. Why not? I could remember it. And so in the specs, you had to set up your server on TCP port 2784. Then down the road a bit, I said, they said you should have a smaller number. So I said, can I have a smaller number? They said, okay, you get 80. And Gopher got 79, and they were jealous. So web traffic is on port 80. Has been ever since, but that was a little bit of coordination later. But basically, permissionless space, being able to, not having to go through hoops, not having to fill in forms, just being able to write code, let it run, and talk to other copies of that code was really, really important for the internet. For me, building on top of it in a way, so I realized that was really important for the web as well. It was really important anybody else to download the web software in turn, run their own web server, link to whatever other websites, and never come to me. Please tell may I make a new website.
And I think for those of us who are passionate about the energy transition, there's palpable envy for that world, because I think in our world you need to apply for permission to put a solar panel on your roof, to put a heat pump in your home, to build a wind farm or a solar farm and connect it to the... You need permission for everything, and they really care about what it is. So you get different permission for a battery than you do for a solar farm than for a wind farm.
Really? I just did that. Yeah. So when the UK war broke out, I had a bit of a prepper moment, and so I thought I need to be independent. So I just ordered from about a couple of 100-watt solar panels and a nice battery, and so I found that I could run my laptop, and under full satellite I could run my laptop with that more or less breaking even. I thought that's good, and if I only have to use the phones, we'll be able to use a bunch of phones. If worst comes to worst with the energy system. So I like the independent. I've always been independent with my sort of internet and data and stuff as well. But so was I breaking rules then?
I think it was mistakes. Okay, yeah, best not tell anyone.
Okay.
Nigel's being shocked at this.
Don't tell Nigel.
And so I think though, one of the keys there is that you didn't have to ask for permission for everything. You didn't have to join any queues. You didn't have to explain, because a data packet was a data packet. And I think we often think, look, electrons are electrons. They're remarkably fungible and identical to each other. And so when we talk about creating less permission in the world of energies, a lot of people worry that if you just connect more stuff, it will break the system. How did the web work so you could add more stuff without breaking the system?
So Bob Metcalfe, who invented the Ethernet, so he's one of my sort of role models, isn't he? And he was at the same lab at MIT, and so he'd been involved in rolling out different levels of internet. And by the way, it's worth noting that when I invented the web, I could have a 300 bits per second modem at home, right? That was like, right? And then maybe then you could spend more pocket money and you could get a 19.2 kilobyte, which is more like, and then you get on a good day you get a 56 kilobit one, which, and then you were rocking. Then your screen was filling really rapidly. But remember that the internet and my next computer would connect to the internet, all right, and it would do these HTTP requests at 300 bits per second. And now can do it at 300 gigabits per second if it wants to. You can get 300 megabits per second. So now we go from the same sort of connector. The Ethernet goes a bit faster, but all the same software stack. And the same concept of Ethernet actually runs a million times faster. Not a lot of things do that, and so I guess the energy has gone up, but trains trains may have gone 30 miles an hour. They don't go at 30 million miles an hour.
We were talking about space travel earlier.
So that was one of the neat things. So I want everybody to design cool stuff to use on the internet. Meanwhile, there was this parallel, completely separate, completely independent. I didn't have to worry at all about people who built Wi-Fi and fiber to the home and stuff. All that was separate, independent, but we did rely on it. And so Bob Metcalfe thought that here at a web conference, he said, there's going to be a mega lapse. He said, it's going to happen. There's going to be a time when we get serious outage. We're getting a mega lapse is like 1 million people offline for an hour or something. He defined it, and he said that he published in an article. He said he would eat his words if it didn't happen. So several years later, he actually ate his words. He put them in a liquidizer, and I think he added gin and downed it on the same stage. So in fact, it wasn't obvious. And yeah, obviously, if you throw a huge amount of effort into the last mile, and you don't have the backbone ready to take it, things are going to get slack. And it's different the way, and still, of course, the internet is different because you can have a fast, and you can know with time that actually if you want to download movies, you should probably do it when everybody else doesn't do it. You should do it at 5 a.m. not 8 a.m. So not 8 p.m. for example. So we do have this sort of if the internet is too stressed, and then everything slows down a bit. People get used to it. People pay more money, but it's very important that all the different layers and the backbones and stuff do have enough investment. And I imagine with power it's kind of similar, isn't it?
It is, and I mean, fascinatingly, some of the conversations today have been about time of use. That is, if you use electricity at times it's abundant, or when the system's less utilised, it can be cheaper. Things like charging an electric car off peak, or when it's windy and sunny, and then using that car's battery as a store of energy. It's so analogous with what you're describing there about, for example, different uses of the network at different times. And of course, I think where people worry about it, incumbent thinking worries about it in energy. We've all lived with it with the internet, and it hasn't stopped the 10 to the 11 increase in internet or web traffic that you saw in those early years. There's some questions coming from the audience as well, Tim.